Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we have with us Jeff Sonnergren, who is with Successful Education Solutions. Welcome to the program, Jeff.
Hi there, Mike. Good to talk to you again.
Hey, you too, and give us a brief background on what you do regarding college planning and why that is important. And then today we're going to focus on a specific, really laser-focused topic within college planning, which is what some opportunities are for student athletes.
Okay. Yeah, so how I got involved with college planning. Yes, I finished college. Yes, I finished my bachelor's degree type thing. But I sort of did it, all wrong. I picked engineering where, as I talked to students, and parents, whether it be Mike or whoever, type thing with their college-bound students, this is sort of the biggest decision, of their life. This isn't a prom date. So in terms of the satisfaction, it is huge. Where they go to school and what they study are two great big decisions on there. And I'm always been involved. I remember doing college searches for some of my friends, in high school, many moons, ago. So the satisfaction, is there. And it's, the rewards, the smiles, just the overall results, can be, huge. And that's not just for the family, but also, for me, the planner. And I think many of us, really get that, satisfaction. And we love those, type of rewards. But, going sort of a deeper level, into, a student athlete, now we've got a couple things going on. So yes, it's hyphenated, but it really needs to be, a situation where we keep our eyes on both prizes. So I've got an athlete. They're God's gift to soccer. They're God's gift to basketball or whatever it is. But we're going to also be playing, or attending class and getting good grades and picking the right school sort of academically. So it makes it sort of one level deeper. Not everyone, does this. It's just something, me being a former athlete, my wife being, a college athlete that went to her school's, Athletic Hall of Fame, it gets to be very, very, exciting and important. So again, it's just one more level that relates to me. Just the way I deal better with engineering students, I also, always take interest, in student athletes as well.
Yeah, it makes me think of when you were talking about that balance between the athletics and the academics. We all know that you have to, stay in a certain grade point average to be able to stay in schools and to stay in athletic programs. But do you ever find when you're working with student athletes on the front end before they even get to college that you can see the end of the road, meaning, at some point in some time, you may get done with sports or get injured, and so we need to make sure that your academics are solid enough that you have that to, fall back on, so to speak. Because I would suspect that a lot of the God's gift to soccer players are going to go, I'm invincible and I will be, the top of the top and never need this. But how do you make sure that that is first and foremost on their mind, that they have a balance there?
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard because, way back when, whatever it is, 10 years ago when I got started, in college planning, I started to do something with some sports that are particularly strong here in the Hudson Valley, in New York State. It's known for lacrosse, maybe, baseball as well, but not, some of these other, sports. So you always see hotbeds for certain things. And, the dad would rather say, my son got a full scholarship to play. Usually the full rides are, sometimes for golf, but, certainly basketball or football. They'd rather say that than I have a full scholarship, full tuition, whatever it might be, for my brilliant daughter at University of Notre Dame. So sometimes that one's tough, to position. But the fact, and sort of how I'll spin it a little bit, and it's like, we're doing both, but we need to do this at college rather than going, directly to the pros, sort of the way like a LeBron James, had done. So the fact that we need to be successful at both, but we get to pick. So yeah, we understand the sports side, our position, and all that, but, as a major, what makes sense. In many ways, it goes back to just any other, student that I'm talking to. What do you really enjoy? What are you passionate about? Whether you read about it, it's your hobby. I've always wanted to be X, all those type of things. So what are we passionate about? And what are we also strong at? So you think about like a basketball player. Yeah, I want to be a power forward in the NBA. And then, 10th grade, you've had your growth spurt, and you're still 5'7". It's like, is this really happening? So there always needs to be a backup plan. There always needs to be, a reality check. We always do it, on college. Are we setting up this student for success? But then the same thing here, with an athlete. I've got all kinds of, all-American, athletes, right here in the Hudson Valley for men's lacrosse. They're used to being like the stud, the big man on campus. You go to a program like a Syracuse or I hate to say Johns Hopkins, but you get the idea. These top programs, it's like, okay, I'm not getting playing time till I'm a junior.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how can I contribute, as an underclassman? Is this a program where I can do that? So that goes back to, the athletic fit, at a program. But meantime, we have to keep going to classes. I may have to take summer classes because I'm taking a lighter load, during the competitive season. So, the demands are different. The focus and sort of the satisfaction, it's going to be highly, sport-related rather than academic-related. So, I always love in the spring, March Madness, this, the men's Division I, basketball tournament. It's like, I forget, I don't know if it's 500,000, but I think it's 450,000 or something like that. Over 450,000 student athletes in the NCAA, but only 2% of them are going pro. Mm-hmm. So that means, great, we can continue, but only for a very, elite few. But those other, whatever it is, 98%, we need to have a real job, type thing. So I need to find something I want, just the way I need to almost think about the way you mentioned it, Mike. Unfortunately, athletic injuries, happen. ACL, it's the third time on my right knee. Sometimes it's concussions, which we hear, even in soccer, nowadays rather than like the high-impact sports like a football,
mm-hmm.
Or an ice hockey. So we always need this backup plan. So they just always see I'm motivated to do two things. Hopefully as a soccer player or basketball player, whatever, but now also as, a student. So that, bringing that all together, can be fun. And one supports the other, and then once we realize they both have to go through together, we can't ignore one. It's like, I'm motivated for this, and I'm motivated for that. So it complicates things and takes more time, but the student in the end will really, appreciate that because, it is just 2% or, a really small number like that.
Yeah, I want to ask how working with student athletes is different because I'm certain that it is compared to a traditional college student looking just to get into a school and positioning and picking the right choices. But what you just described there makes me think, as you answer the question or address the point, how is working with student athletes different, you talked about something that made me think of the word mindset. So the student that gets on the lacrosse team and doesn't get major playing time until a junior, I'm sure that there's a mindset shift that they need to be prepared for as they're entering in and planning and choosing their schools. And then you also mentioned the backup plan with having the academics and what if you get injured or whatnot. And I would say related to that mindset shift, it might not be best to say backup plan because that feels like, oh, that's just a fallback. But do you ever find yourself saying to them, hey, you know what, we need to plan for future successes by having that academic foundation there so that when sports are no longer there, you've got a great foundation for success. So can you speak to mindset and backup plan versus planning for success? And then how is, student athletes different working with them and in approaching the college planning process?
Yeah, I think, as you thought about, what I said, there is, a huge, mindset shift. But I think, more importantly, it's both, and it's both together. Student, athlete, they go together. They have to go together. So we're focusing on both pieces, with all that. So, in general, as I work, with student athletes, I do the academic side, someone else does the athletic side, whether it be talent assessments, relationships with coaches, some of the marketing that goes on, which tournaments or showcases do we attend. So it's always, a partnership, with myself and, some athletic talent guy or woman in like a practice in dealing with, a student athlete, and with their, their parents. But so how does things, how are things, differently or different? The main thing is, you get an idea of the commitment levels, that are necessary, to be successful, and the expectations, to be a contributing member of a team, they're significant. It may feel like a full-time job, but then guess what? I'm already a full-time student. So sometimes adjusting, the list, a student's college list, to be slightly easier. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So say we're a good student, this A- student, not C+, not A+, but again, nice student. And, we on paper, if I was just being a student, belong at these colleges. This is a nice academic fit. But that would involve, who knows, 30 hours a week in the library. But if we lower our sights a little, and we only needed to study 15 hours to get those same grades. Oh, I just found 15 hours. Well, that's not enough for a sport, but you get the idea. I can have the time to contribute to my sport and still get good grades. So that's sort of the balancing act, on that. I once, talked to a family. Both parents were professors up at Dartmouth, Ivy League Dartmouth. And, somehow athletics came up. And the mom had said, I feel sorry for those students. They are up against, you think about, an Ivy League school, the brightest, the most driven and focused students out there. And now I've got the commitments of a Division I sport. It's like, how did they possibly do it? How do they sleep? How do they keep good grades? But these, some of these students are just as brilliant as they are, gifted as athletes. And I mean like off scale. So that gets to be, a unique challenge. It's like, how are we realistic to make this not just a mild win, but a strong win athletically, and then, again, academically. So, picking the schools, with the realization I don't have all this time in the library because I have, whether I'm practicing, whether I'm in strength and conditioning, whether I'm looking at film, there's so many different ways that just gobble up, a ton of time. And a lot of times, going back to, the coaches, and I need to build, my team, I'm seeing who's graduating, a lot of times a coach could be working 2 years, in advance, this recruiting class and the next recruiting class after that. So, a lot of times this academic side should, again, start maybe in a year earlier, in 10th grade. And sometimes athletically, we haven't had our growth spurt yet. And, our 10th graders getting playing time, even if they're super, strong. I get this here, in the Hudson Valley. There's two that come to mind, soccer players. Like, finally, they're contributing, in 10th grade just because the team is so strong. But that's who, ultimately is going to get these soccer scholarships. So the time frame, is earlier. And then, obviously, I need to be a student. What am I going to be? What do I like? What do I enjoy in my classroom? What are my favorite classes? What also am I strong at? So we sort of have to have, both of them go together. Who cares if you love it, if you just don't have the skill set, et cetera, for that. So, those are some of the ways, many of them are similar to a regular student, but, they're going to be unique and maybe on a different time frame with, a typical student. A lot of times that sweet spot, is a high school junior. Maybe we need to go back, a year, but really being realistic about, how hard of a school can I go to and still get good grades, but then to also do all that I can possibly do, with the team.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point that it's kind of like 100% and 100%, which doesn't add up to 100%. But how do you find yourself giving advice regarding how important a high school academic record is? Because for a student athlete, I'm sure they're looking at headlines in the newspapers and stats for their sports side. But how do you advise on the academic record side?
It gets to be, really important, on there. And sometimes, you think, I don't need to do this. And I'll always joke, with parents, when I don't know how many parents I talk to a year, 250, with their students. And they think they're going to be, this is going back to the growth spurt, silly example. They don't try. They're not doing their assignments, and they're, putting in, a 50% effort or something like that. And then again, 100 might be an unreasonable, effort to put in, but, 3 on a scale of 10 rather than a 7 on a scale of 10. And all of a sudden, the first 2 years, it's like they're not working very hard. They're really focusing on, I want to make varsity as a 10th grader, et cetera. And their GPA's down. And it's not reflective, of their ability as a student. So it gets to be, really important. And then we start to see, well, my average, my GPA, when I put in my applications, in the fall of my senior year, or I'm considering, national letter of intent, or different, things like that. The coaches also know that there are a ton of super gifted athletes in every sport. You need to be eligible. So I went to Syracuse, and a few years ago, there's a guy named Fab Mello. And guess who sat on the bench during the tournament and the Final Four, type thing? He did. So as a coach is looking at a player, they want to know not what your 40 time is, but what's your SAT score. They need you on the field. And I think the most unfortunate thing is 1 year or one season at a school is awful for both sides, the university and their sports program, but also, that student as well. We don't need that. So again, we've got to work hard, or, obviously the serious commitment. Of course, we'd rather be playing soccer or basketball or something like that. We can't ignore the other one. So the balance there, is going to be very, very, key.
Yeah, balance is just a enormously important word, and I think that when you're considering a student athlete, they know exactly what position they are best at and what they could grow into, but I think when it comes time to, well, what do I study in college, it almost is like what you were saying, the 3 on a scale of 10 compared to a 7 on a scale of 10. So how do you advise on how to approach considering a college major?
All right, so, going back to, the effort level, the coach, all things being equal, they're going to take the stronger student. They are less of a risk. They don't want, 1 year, one and done. And unfortunately, we see that, way too often, particularly in, men's college basketball. So that's important there. But, going back to, what do we study, just like any other student, I like to go through, your classes. So I take, honors, Algebra 2 and trigonometry, but you just get the idea, how advanced are they, in math? What are they is it appropriate for them to take an honors or an AP level class, or am I just taking, grade level? So we always want to sort of pick the appropriate level. We want to challenge ourselves, certainly not bury ourselves, but we also want to, and again, the idea, to a coach is like, he's worked hard. He's not taking the easy way out. I know that, and that's what I want for him in his soccer. That's also what I want for him, in the classroom, him or her, obviously, in the classroom. So I'm always listening to, what are your favorite classes? What do you look most forward to? And sometimes we know this in elementary school. I don't read. I love math, or something along, those lines. So we're always getting an idea. If we need to work at this, I want to look forward to it. I'm going to get satisfaction, in this career. I don't like a whole lot of math, so nursing may work. There's jobs there, but it's not math, intensive. So understanding, where we're strong, and maybe the other way, I can't stand this. We want to stay away from that or make it really light. I tried to do this with engineering, staying away from, reading and writing, and it didn't work that well. It's always, part of it, but you get the idea. We want to match our strengths, but also minimizing the the damage, on our, weaknesses. And I'm always saying that, going back a little bit to the school again, are we SAT or ACT? So just the way I'm a center midfielder, I am not a goalie. But what are you, SAT or ACT? And say, well, why this test? Because in 3.5 hours you can change your world, type thing. That student that hasn't worked very hard at all, it's like, I put myself in a huge hole for those 2 years. And if I'm applying, like I was starting to say by Thanksgiving of my senior year, I've got one good year as a senior, or as a junior, one good year as a junior, and then one quarter. So it's hard to change that. It almost feels like we're turning a battleship. But here, in a 3.5-hour test with 25 hours of studying, I can really help myself. And then we get the idea of like the student's potential is there. We need to focus, on all that. And essentially, what goes on, and certainly this has changed in a generation, the help that the college gives the university. We have note takers. We have special, tutoring sessions and on and on, for all that. They know they've got a great athlete. They also know I need a good student type thing. How can I help them? How can I make it more efficient to give them the tools so they're still succeeding nicely, as a student, and then have time to be a valuable, contributor, to my, program. And, the other layer, of your question is, we pick our classes, but we can pick SAT or ACT. Yeah, geographically there's always a historical, pattern, but the colleges really don't care which one am I. And it's like, this is, I always go back, here's my position on the soccer field. I'm a strong student in my SAT or ACT. And just like so many things, I can be great at one sport and awful, in the other. So it's like, which tests are we predisposed to? And again, that's sort of a true short-term way, to, help ourselves. And maybe the only short-term way is to figure out SAT or ACT, in terms of changing your academic stock value, in the eyes of a coach.
Because that plays right into the college application and approval process along with your high school transcripts is your standardized test, ACT or SAT test. So now you've got a student-athlete going, all right, I'm struggling to achieve good grades in high school. Now you tell me I've got to study crazy amounts of hours for the standardized test. What is your approach that way? How do you advise on studying for these tests?
They don't want to. They'd rather be playing their sport. And, a lot of things, how long do I have to study? And really what they're saying is, what's the bare minimum I can do to satisfy you, and then I get what I get. That gets to be, a challenge. But, going back to one of the things I just said, we can't change our GPA sort of overnight.
Right.
We can't change it a lot, even in, a year, type thing. So their ability, you think about, they're always looking for efficiency and saving time to do what they want to do, what they're most excited about. So if we need to do this, we need to be very, very smart, tactical, efficient, on here. So, sometimes I want to work with a tutor, but, that's not for everybody, and it's certainly an expensive way to do things. Nothing wrong with it. It's just, could be, expensive in terms of, how many hours does it take to work with a tutor to really get a return on my investment. But the main thing is, can I afford, those hundreds, thousands of dollars, to do that? So I know always in a part of our program, I'll offer an online, version on it, but it's very, tactical. And, I had actually a lacrosse player, scholarship lacrosse player. He played at St. John's University, New York. The mom came back and said, he'll finally do this. He never wants to spend any time, except at lacrosse in terms of studies. So he was a sort of an average, student, but he also had ADD. And the mom said, I've never seen him do this, before. You could stay, focused. And he saw the results, sort of like anything, attaboy, type thing right away. So I went from a 550 to a 600, and I only spent 6 hours on this. It's like they feel great. So seeing the rewards immediately and sort of gaining the confidence, which is always important, whether as a student or obviously as an athlete, because everything's so goal, driven, can be very important. So I've found just put that in there and just, explain it, put that, that tool, in my package, as I work with students, and then they can see it. If I've got to do it, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it once. I'm not going to overstudy because I know that's not realistic or sustainable, but I need to be very efficient at this. So it's like, well, that's what we do. So if I've got to do it, let me be efficient and smart about it, and then move on. So, in general, what I'm looking for is, back to the SAT or ACT. It's like I'm doing it a minimum number of times, and I'm taking the test that's going to help me. Why waste my time, as a goalkeeper when I'm that center midfielder? This makes no sense. Same thing here. If I've got 20 hours of time that Jeff says I need to do, let's do it where it's going to help ourselves.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point because, and it's obvious, but the way that you phrased it, it made me have kind of an aha moment. Well, about the time in high school that you realize, I need to tweak my GPA, it's either too late or it's not as easy because it's like turning that battleship because you're in mid to late 10th grade and it's a cumulative deal. And that doesn't mean you give up, but it means that where is more of your immediate benefit going to come by buckling down and really working on those standardized tests, because you could spend 30 extra hours studying in your current classes, and that might be some minuscule change to your GPA, but that 30 hours studying for the ACT or SAT could pop you up a nice number of points, and that would give you an extra piece of momentum.
Yeah, because, you think about I spent, 20 extra hours, studying for my AP biology. So I go from a low B to an A. But that's one of 5 classes, and obviously it's a full year, but you get the idea. There may be 15, 20 classes that you're taking over that. So you did nicely in that one. But, this is like the battleship thing. We need 10 of those. And it's like, well, how am I going to do this in 10 of my classes, when it's 20 hours of each to get a really strong grade? So that goes back, we'll take those 20 hours and really go for it, on, these standardized tests. One thing that, and I heard nicely, said, GPA is grit, not sort of just raw intelligence. I'm balancing a lot of subjects. Some I'm interested in, some I'm not. I have good teachers, I have bad teachers, type thing. So it's like that GPA, pretty much says if this is like a 4.0 student or a 3.8 student, regardless of what happens, they're going to do, very well, type thing. So that's, that goes back to the idea of GPA, helping ourselves. But, 30 hours on an SAT or ACT, and it doesn't have to be quite that many, can also be, very helpful. But, what the coach asks, they're going to ask your GPA, but it's like, well, are you taking any AP classes? What's your SAT score? What's your ACT score? Very fast. 2 numbers, 40-yard time and, SAT. And it's like, oh, I guess that's what's important. And always, when dealing, we're sort of talking about marketing, of a student athlete. When I'm talking to regular parents, I think at this point, we've realized, colleges, they just aren't colleges, but they're businesses. And the other piece is, so what do businesses do? They buy who and what they want. But they're businesses and not charities. So you think about, why am I giving a scholarship to this 3-star basketball player rather than this 5-star basketball player? Same thing in terms of caliber, of the student. It always, is in terms of merit, on a student. So you do what's important, and what's important to the coach, what questions are they asking? So I can look better, more deserving of, this academic scholarship, this athletic scholarship, et cetera.
Well, let's wrap up with this question, which I think will just kind of wrap up the conversation and put a nice pretty bow on it. And probably if we were to look at a bulleted list of all the things you do as a college planner for the family and what you're able to bring to the table to benefit, it would be a dramatic long list from the college planning side. And then probably next to that list, if you did the same bulleted list for what you could do or should do for a student athlete with, like what you're saying, relations with the coach and the school and the athletics and the marketing. At some point, Jeff can only do what Jeff can do. So talk about your approach to serving the student athlete and the team that you bring to help the student athlete out. Okay.
Yeah. So one thing, that we talked about earlier is the need to really start, earlier. So, if a coach is looking, for baseball, I need middle infielders. Both of these guys are great. They're all conference, but they're going. And, I don't have, because they've been practicing with the team, I don't have strong, backfills, at this point. So starting earlier, is important. So identifying sometimes the college major, sort of that do-what-you-are exercise, I'm going to put that in quotes, type thing, to get them also inspired. And why are we picking something? Well, we're picking something you want. So then it doesn't get to be painful, rather than, I've got to take all these general education, classes. Why do I need 4 years of English? It's like, when I want to be an engineer. So that's sort of the idea on that. So it's helping a student understand, what they really enjoy, and getting sort of on that track early. Am I taking the right prerequisite classes? We always have that in college, but the same thing, there's always going to be stepping stones, going through, your high school classes. Okay, I want to be, a nurse. So am I taking, biology? I have AP biology, but does my school have anatomy and physiology? Can I do an online class? Can I do a dual enrollment class during the year? Can I take a class at a community college, over the summer? So there's always the need to prepare early. And again, it's usually just conversations, and then we're sort of setting, realistic, goals, for ourselves, just the way we do, athletically. We need to do it on the classroom. So there's always a blueprint involved, and it feels like it's on a treadmill. We just need to get on that treadmill, earlier on, in the process. So whether it be SAT or ACT, who knows, course selection, career identification, college major identification, and then college identification. So those are the pieces I do, but overlapping, but also complementing, this is exactly what that athletic talent specialist is also doing. So they're developing, the student, they're being realistic in their assessments, are we D1 caliber, are we D3 caliber, or whatever, it might be. We're assessing their position, have they grown, et cetera, what are the demands in these positions, maybe what's an injury history that could impact that as well. So you've got, the athletic, evaluator, if you will. So those are critical, both pieces, just like student athlete, and again, academic counselor, me, and then also the, let's call it the talent evaluator, for soccer, for baseball, lacrosse, whatever it's going to be. So there's two pieces there, starting early, communicating early, and I think everything, we do, it's like there's critical periods. It's a long period, so we're trying to make that as stress-free as possible. We're playing in the right tournaments. We're joining the right, sort of the teams that have winning recommendations, and hopefully we're going to a school that, is known as a powerhouse in, X, school. But it's not always that way, and then obviously it's most always not that way. So what other ways can I help myself? So we always know about, baseball showcases or lacrosse showcases. They're going on crazy now. My son's got a lot of friends, involved, with that. So it's two pieces, starting early, being realistic, and then just keep the ball rolling. And everything we're doing is, a focus on both of those prizes. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in, exercise science, and I'm, we won our sectional championship and our conference championship in, men's soccer. And it's like, those are the two things. So start early, talk. There's help out there. A lot of times, unfortunately, this goes back in the family thinks, I'm going to do it, or my high school coach is going to do it. Certainly they can help, but they've got a lot of players. They've got limited time. So sometimes we need sort of like a special team, like we always hear about in football, the kickoff team, et cetera. We need that. We need specialists that are really dealing with this. And essentially the specialist is really a very small team of two, working with, the student athlete.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, but the point is it's a team, and you've got people working with the parents to give very specific advice on the athletic side, you on the academic side, and coming together gives that 100% plus 100% equals 300%. So I think that's a really neat approach. And so what's the best way that parents or student athletes can learn more and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm here, in the Hudson Valley. So I've got an office here in Carmel, New York. I have a website. My My company is called Successful Education, Solutions. So like anything else, Google it, type thing. So it's just www.Successful Education Solutions. I'm active, on social media. I'm looking forward to, having an article in a soccer magazine that's coming up called Fair Play. So I'll share this interview, in that article, but also reciprocally, mention this interview, in the article, and then vice versa. So contacting me is easy. I love to talk, all day about student athletes. As bad as it sounds, I don't care if you're a client. If I can touch and motivate someone, that's going to be huge. But obviously, with the experience and the relationships, that has happened, for a good number of student athletes.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful chatting about how to successfully work with student athletes in college planning. So have a good rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time.
Great, Mike. Good talking to you again.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.